The town of Elk Ridge was not the sort of place that made headlines or drew tourists. It sat quietly between the ridgelines of nowhere, cradled by thick forests and silence, the kind of silence that pressed into your bones and made you forget time. People lived there like trees, planted, unmoving, generations deep. The woods surrounding Elk Ridge were older than anything with a name. Locals called them the Hollow, though no one remembered why. Maybe because of the way sound vanished inside, or maybe because the trees grew in that strange, concave bowl of land behind the hills. If you asked, the old-timers would shrug and tell you not to go poking around. Nothing good grows where the woods lean inward, they'd say. But no one really believed that. Not in 2025. Not until Emily Warren disappeared. It had started like any Sunday. The Warrens, Claire, Daniel, and 8-year-old Emily, drove their old Subaru past the farms and fields to the edge of the hollow. Claire packed sandwiches. Daniel brought his old camera. Emily carried a yellow backpack with a sketchbook, crayons, and the blue ribbon she never took out of her hair. The forest, despite its reputation, was beautiful in July. Sunlight filtered through the leaves like stained glass. Everything smelled like earth and warmth. It was the kind of day that made you forget fear. They found a clearing near a moss-covered boulder and laid out a red and white checkered blanket. Emily skipped to the tree line, chasing dragonflies, while Claire and Daniel argued about politics and PTA meetings. No one noticed the moment Emily vanished. 1 second she was there, twirling with arms outstretched under the maple trees. The next, the woods had swallowed her whole. Emily? Claire stood up, brushing sandwich crumbs from her lap. Honey. She walked to where her daughter had been only seconds before. Emily. Louder this time. Panic already swelling. Daniel joined her, scanning the woods. She's hiding, he said. You know how she plays. Just give her a second. But there was no laughter. No rustling leaves. No boo from behind a tree. Just stillness, too still for a forest. They searched for an hour. Then 2. The sun dropped lower, gold turning to rust. Claire's voice cracked from calling. Daniel's face lost color. When night finally began to bleed into the trees, Claire found it. Sitting on a rock where Emily had last been seen was a doll. It was old, far older than anything that belonged to Emily. Its porcelain skin was cracked like dry clay. One eye was missing. A jagged seam ran across the doll's cheek, as if someone had tried to sew it back together and failed. But it wasn't just the decay. It was the ribbon. A blue ribbon, Emily's ribbon, tied perfectly into the doll's tangled hair. Claire stared at it. Her breath caught in her throat. She reached for it. The porcelain was warm. And for just a second, she could swear the doll's lips parted, ever so slightly. The police arrived just after dusk. Flashlights bobbed between the trees like fireflies. Radios crackled with clipped voices, repeating coordinates and search patterns. Claire stood in a daze near the picnic blanket, the doll clutched to her chest, her knuckles white. No one asked her why she held it. No one dared. Last time you saw her? Deputy Hartman asked, scribbling in a weathered notebook. He had kind eyes but wore the face of a man who'd done this before. 3, maybe 4 o'clock, Daniel said, running his fingers through his hair. She was playing, right there by the tree line. He pointed, as if that gesture might undo something. And then she was just gone. No sound? No scream? Nothing, Claire whispered. Not even footsteps. It was like the trees just opened and... Her voice cracked, and she pressed the doll tighter to her chest. Deputy Hartman glanced at it. That hers? Claire shook her head. No. But it was sitting right where she disappeared. He raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. After a moment, he stepped back and radioed something in a low voice. More officers arrived, with search dogs and reflective vests. A temporary perimeter was set up, complete with floodlights and plastic cones. The forest swallowed the light whole. By midnight, the woods had been combed. No signs. No prints. No torn clothes, no blood, no dropped ribbon. Just that doll. Claire refused to leave. She stood at the edge of the trees, whispering Emily's name over and over until her voice was hoarse. Daniel tried to convince her to go home. You need sleep. Just a few hours. They'll keep looking. Claire stared into the trees. She's not lost. She was taken. Daniel blinked. By who? Claire looked down at the doll. It now sat on the passenger seat of the car, facing forward like it had always belonged there. I don't know, she whispered. But she's still here. I can feel her. They returned to their home at 3:12 a.m. Emily's room was untouched. Her bed unmade. Her little drawings still taped to the walls. Claire stood in the doorway, eyes drifting across the smiling suns and stick-figure castles. On the nightstand sat Emily's favorite stuffed animal, a plush grey rabbit with one ear missing. Claire turned and went downstairs, the doll still in her arms. She placed it on the living room table and sat across from it. The doll's glass eye glinted in the dim light. Claire watched it. And it watched back. The next morning, the sun came up soft and peach-colored. Daniel returned to the woods to help the search party. Claire stayed home. She barely slept. She barely moved. But she did notice something. The doll, when she came down the stairs, was no longer on the table. It was sitting in Emily's chair at the kitchen table. Claire froze. Her heart thudded in her throat. Daniel, she called out, knowing full well he wasn't home. Silence. She stepped forward slowly. The doll sat stiff and unmoving. But its head was slightly tilted now, as if studying her. Then, soft as breath, Claire heard it. A whisper. Just one word. Mommy. She backed away from the chair, knees shaking. The sound hadn't come from the hallway. It hadn't come from the room. It had come from the doll. She didn't remember picking it up. But suddenly it was in her arms again, like it had leapt there. Her hands trembled as she carried it back into the living room. She set it on the mantel, high above where little hands could reach. It did not fall. It sat perfectly still. Its lips were closed. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She sat in Emily's room, clutching the missing ribbon she found in the doll's hair. She turned it over in her hands again and again. She tried to pray. Tried to believe this was just grief. But around 3 a.m., she heard footsteps. Tiny ones. Coming from downstairs. Shall I continue with chapter 3, The Doll, where things start to escalate, movements, dreams, whispers, and Claire begins to question her sanity. The footsteps were soft, like bare feet padding over cold tile. Claire sat up in Emily's bed, the ribbon still clutched in her palm. For a moment, she told herself she was dreaming. But the sound continued, downstairs, near the kitchen. She stood slowly, barefoot, her nightgown brushing the floor. Every part of her screamed not to move. Not to look. Not to know. But a stronger part of her, the mother, forced her down the stairs. Each step groaned beneath her weight. The house was so still it felt like it was listening. She reached the bottom and turned the corner into the kitchen. The doll was standing on the table. Not sitting. Standing. Its cracked porcelain feet were perfectly balanced on the wooden surface, its arms hanging limply at its sides. Its remaining eye faced the doorway, tilted slightly toward her. Waiting. Claire froze. The lights flickered. Then the whisper came again, clearer this time. Mommy, it's cold. Claire's breath caught. She moved without thinking, lunging forward and sweeping the doll off the table into her arms. It didn't resist. It didn't move. It felt warm, like it had been alive. She clutched it to her chest and whispered, Emily. And then, for a second, she swore she felt tiny arms wrap around her. she told Daniel the next morning. Over cold coffee and untouched toast, Claire described the voice, the footsteps, the warmth, the way the doll stood on the table like a child trying to be seen. Daniel said nothing at first. He just stared at her, hollow-eyed from another night in the woods. His fingers tapped restlessly on the tabletop. Then, Claire, this isn't healthy. You're grieving. I get it. We both are. But this isn't Emily. It's a doll. Claire didn't respond. Daniel sighed. Maybe you should talk to someone. I am, she said. I'm talking to you. He stood, shaking his head. I'm going back out. They are expanding the search grid. We'll find her. As he reached for the keys, Claire whispered, the forest took her. Daniel froze. What? The hollow. It took her. And it gave me this thing in return. Daniel stared at her like he didn't recognize her. Don't do this. Please. Don't lose yourself. He left without another word. The moment the door clicked shut, Claire turned to the mantel. The doll was gone. She found it in Emily's room. Sitting on the bed. Head turned toward the window. Claire stood in the doorway, heart pounding. Her mouth was dry. She stepped forward and touched its cracked cheek. It was warm again. She whispered, Emily, if you're in there, give me a sign. The room fell still. And then the lights flickered. Claire's phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She pulled it out. The screen was black, but words were being typed across the messaging app. A new message. Mommy. The trees watch. I'm scared. I'm still here. Claire dropped the phone. Her knees buckled. The doll's eye blinked. That night, Claire didn't sleep. Instead, she sat in the living room with every light on, the doll seated across from her on the coffee table. She watched it. It watched back. Sometimes it shifted. Not much, just a subtle tilt of the head, a change in posture. But it was real. At one point, around 2 a.m., the doll raised its tiny hand and pointed toward the front door. Claire rose, trembling. She walked to the door and opened it. Wind howled through the porch. The trees stood still. And on the doorstep sat a piece of paper, folded into a square. She opened it. It was a crayon drawing, one of Emily's. A stick figure family, Mommy, Daddy, and a small girl with a blue ribbon. They were standing in front of a forest. The trees had faces. And one tree, taller than the others, had arms. It held the little girl in its roots. Claire began to cry. Not because of fear, but because she knew, deep down, that Emily wasn't gone. She was trapped. And she was calling for help. The next morning, Claire left the doll in Emily's bed, wrapped carefully in a blanket like a sleeping child. She kissed its forehead. I'll bring you back, she whispered. I promise. Then she drove, without telling Daniel, out past the edge of town. Past the school, the closed-down post office, and the old grain silos. She followed a dirt road that twisted like a vein into the far eastern woods. She was looking for Martha Crow. A name only whispered in Elk Ridge, usually followed by jokes or warnings. She talks to trees, they'd say. Burned her own house down and said it was the forest punishing her. She's got teeth in jars. Don't knock unless you want something to follow you home. Claire had never believed in those stories. But now, she wasn't sure what she believed anymore. Martha's home sat hunched at the edge of a forgotten ridge, surrounded by blackberry bushes and antlered wooden effigies. The house was built from dark, weather-worn timber, its windows covered in thick cloth, its roof sagging under the weight of creeping moss. Claire hesitated at the gate. A rusted sign read, "Do not enter unless invited." Before she could knock, the door creaked open. An old woman stood in the threshold, wrapped in a green shawl, eyes pale and sharp as cracked quartz. "Mrs. Warren," she said. "I wondered when you'd come." Claire blinked. "How do you?" I saw your child go into the trees. She stepped aside. Come in. Quickly. The interior smelled of burnt herbs and soil. The walls were covered in shelves, jars filled with ash, pressed flowers, carved bones. Bundles of dried lavender and crow feathers hung from the ceiling like chandeliers. Martha motioned toward a cracked armchair. You've seen it, haven't you? She said. The doll. Claire nodded. And you've heard her? Claire's voice trembled. She talks to me. Through the doll. Through the phone. Through the trees. Martha closed her eyes. Then it's begun again. She poured black tea from a copper kettle and sat across from Claire. There's something you need to understand, Martha said. The hollow is not a place. Not just trees and dirt. It's a wound. Something old and hungry lives beneath it, the old mother of Hollow. Claire felt her skin crawl. Is it a ghost? A demon? No, Martha said softly. She's older than those things. A dryad, maybe. A spirit of the forest, twisted by grief and sacrifice. A mother, once, like you. But she was betrayed long ago, and now she takes children to fill her emptiness. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Why Emily? She was nearby. Alone. And the old mother saw what she wanted, innocence, joy, laughter. Things she cannot remember. So she took it. And in its place, she gave you a vessel, a prison. Claire whispered, the doll. Martha nodded. The transformation isn't complete. That's why you can still hear her. Still feel her warmth. Your daughter's soul is trapped, halfway. If you wait too long, she'll forget who she was. Claire's breath caught. Then how do I save her? Martha rose and went to a cluttered shelf. She returned with a box of cracked, yellowed vellum, pages of runes, etchings, symbols that pulsed faintly in the dim light. There's a ritual, she said. An old one. Forbidden, because it risks angering the forest. But it can show you the truth. Let you see where Emily really is. Speak to her directly. Claire took the box. What do I have to do? Martha leaned close. Her breath smelled of smoke and root. You must go to the clearing at the hollow center. At midnight. Place the doll in a circle of salt and ash. And you must not flinch. No matter what it shows you. No matter what voice it wears. She placed a hand on Claire's chest. And if it offers you a trade, never accept. That night, Claire drove into the hollow alone. The doll sat silently beside her in the passenger seat, its eye reflecting moonlight. The road narrowed. Trees leaned in. Her headlights flickered once, then died. She walked the last mile through darkness, her flashlight cutting narrow paths through shadow. She heard whispers, snatches of voices, soft laughter. Branches creaked above her like bones. Then the clearing opened before her. And the forest went silent. She poured the salt and ash in a circle. Placed the doll gently at its center. And waited. For minutes, nothing happened. Then the wind shifted. The trees bent backward, groaning. And from the circle of salt, the doll lifted into the air, trembling. It began to spin. Slowly. Its one eye rolled back, and porcelain cracked open across its face, revealing something beneath, a small, flickering face, crying. Emily. She opened her mouth. And screamed. The sound was wrong, it wasn't a child's scream. It was layered, deep, ancient. Claire fell to her knees, eyes wide. From the trees came movement, long limbs creaking, bark bending into shape. A towering figure emerged, made of branches, roots, and sorrow. Its face was a twisted trunk, hollow-eyed, weeping sap. The old mother of Hollow. Her voice was wind and rot. You want the child. But she is mine. She laughed. She danced. She called out to the woods. Claire stood. Take me instead. The forest shivered. Too old. Too broken. I want what was taken from me, innocence. Claire sobbed. Please, she's only 8. The old mother leaned forward, her form crumbling and reforming with every breath. Then bring me another. A soul for a soul. And with that, the clearing emptied. The doll fell to the earth. Emily's voice echoed one last time, soft and fading. Mommy. Claire collapsed, the doll pressed to her chest. She screamed into the hollow night, but no one answered. Only the trees. Elk Ridge, 1731. Before the town was Elk Ridge, it was just a name spoken in whispers, Wendlow's Hollow. A crescent of forest wrapped around a settlement of 14 families, settlers who had come west from the colonies, seeking farmland and refuge from war and famine. But the land had already been claimed. They didn't know it yet, but the trees were alive. And not in the way all forests live. No, this place had a will. A slow-breathing, long-thinking mind buried deep beneath soil and stone. It had rules. A memory. A hunger. And it had a guardian. She was not always called the Old Mother. In those days, she was Elspeth, a woman of moss and root and silence. She walked the forest with bark for skin and stars for eyes. Her voice was the creak of ancient limbs and her song the hum of buried streams. She was the forest. And the forest was her. When the settlers arrived, they cut trees, planted corn, killed deer without thanks. And Elspeth watched. She warned them, in the way of the old spirits. The first child who laughed in the woods vanished by morning. They found his boots filled with sap, his hat nailed to a tree with bone. Still, the settlers stayed. And then came the plague. One by one, the children began to wither. No illness. No wound. Just stillness. Eyes open, breath shallow, bodies cold as if stolen from the inside. They begged for help from God. Got no answer. Then, one night, a woman named Agnes Wendlow, the founder's wife, wandered into the forest alone. She carried her dead son in her arms. She followed the whispers until she reached the heart of the hollow. And there she met Elspeth. The spirit had grown twisted from watching the settlers bleed her forest. Her limbs cracked with disease. Her once kind face had become a mask of gnarled bark. And yet, she listened. Agnes dropped to her knees and said, "Please, bring my son back." Elspeth looked down at the small, lifeless boy. "Give me a trade," she said. "I don't want one," Agnes sobbed. "I want him." "Then give me another," Elspeth replied. "A life for a life. A soul for a soul. That is the law." Agnes hesitated. Then she spoke. "There is a girl in the village. Ruth Emery. Orphan. No kin. Take her." Elspeth tilted her head. "You offer me someone else's child." Agnes trembled. I have no choice." Elspeth considered. Then she reached into the soil and pulled forth a blossom shaped like an open mouth. She whispered to it. And before dawn, Ruth Emery was gone. In her place, Agnes's son awoke. The next day, Agnes said nothing. Her son played in the sun again, laughing as though he'd never died. But from that day forward, the hollow claimed a child every 27 years. The forest was owed. A bargain had been struck. And if the town ever failed to offer someone, the forest would choose its own. Back in the present, Claire's vision ended with a jolt. She awoke on Martha's floor, sweating, her breath ragged. The ritual had pulled her into the past, and she'd seen the moment it all began. Martha crouched beside her. "What did you see?" Claire sat up slowly. There was a woman. Agnes Wendlow. She made a trade. She started all of this. Martha nodded grimly. "Then the cycle continues. And your daughter was the latest toll." Claire's eyes darkened. "Then I'll break it." Martha placed a hand on her shoulder. "That means giving the hollow something greater than a child. Something it's never had before." Claire looked up. What does it want? Martha's voice was like falling leaves. It wants remembrance. It wants its name spoken again. Its pain known. Or, it wants a mother's heart in exchange for a child's soul. Claire drove back from Martha's with shaking hands and a heart full of resolve. The doll sat on the passenger seat, silent and heavy with meaning. The trees seemed to watch her as she passed. The branches moved when there was no wind. When she pulled into the driveway, Daniel was on the porch, waiting. He looked haggard, dazed without sleep, his shirt stained with dirt and leaves. "You've been gone all day," he said flatly. Claire didn't answer. He saw the doll in her arms and paled. "You brought that thing to her room again?" "She's not a thing," Claire said. "She's our daughter." Daniel's voice cracked. "Claire, please. You need help. Real help." Claire stepped past him. "I don't have time to explain. I saw it. The truth. The hollow takes one every 27 years. Emily was the toll." Daniel followed, voice rising. "That's insane." She turned. "When was the last child to go missing in this town?" Daniel froze. I don't know." "Yes, you do," she said quietly. "It was when we were 1 year old. That boy who vanished in the orchard. Thomas Kearney. And now, 27 years later, it's Emily." She turned. "When was the last child to go missing in this town?" Daniel froze. I don't know." "Yes, you do," she said quietly. "It was when we were 1 year old. That boy who vanished in the orchard. Thomas Kearney. And now, 27 years later, it's Emily." That night, Claire gathered everything Martha had given her. Salt from the hollow's edge. Ashes of the lost. A candle made from forest tallow. A page written in Elspeth's own tongue. At midnight, she returned to the clearing. This time, Daniel followed her. He didn't believe. Not fully. But something in Claire's eyes had shifted, something awful and true. And the moment she stepped into the hollow, the air changed. It was colder. Thicker. As if the forest knew she was back. They reached the clearing. Claire knelt and recreated the circle of salt and ash, setting the doll in the center. She read the invocation aloud. "Elspeth of root and thorn, old mother of Hollowborn, hear my cry. By the first trade, and by the pact broken, I call upon thee to return what was taken." The candle flickered violently. The earth trembled. From the trees came groaning, deep and wet, like the forest was trying to vomit up its secrets. The doll rose into the air again, limbs hanging limp, eyes rolling back. But this time, it spoke in Emily's real voice. "Mommy, don't leave me. It's cold. The trees are angry." Claire cried out. "Emily. I'm here." The voice that answered was not hers. "You come again with empty hands, Mother. Where is the trade? The pact is not broken. The toll is not paid." Claire shook her head. "You've had enough. You've taken too many. I offer you this instead, memory. Truth. Your name returned." She took the parchment with Elspeth's true name and held it to the flame. The ground shook. Branches lashed from the trees like tentacles. Daniel screamed as a root wrapped around his ankle and dragged him toward the trees. Claire ran to him, grabbing his arm. "Don't let go." The forest hissed. The voice filled the clearing. "Memory is not enough. Give me your grief. Your love. Your heart." Claire looked up at the floating doll, her daughter. Then she took the knife Martha had given her and, without hesitation, cut her palm open. Blood hit the ground inside the circle. "I give you my sorrow. My love. My pain." Every moment I rocked her to sleep. Every time she called my name. Every dream I had for her life. I give it all. The forest paused. The voice fell silent. Then, a whisper. Accepted. The light from the candle went out. The doll dropped, lifeless. Claire collapsed forward, sobbing. Please, let her go. There was a long, terrible silence. Then, small fingers touched her cheek. Mommy? Claire opened her eyes. Emily stood in the circle, barefoot, pale, but alive. She looked around, frightened. Where's my doll? Claire pulled her into a hug and didn't let go. Daniel helped them both up. The hollow behind them seemed to exhale. And for the first time in hundreds of years, the forest was quiet. As they left, a single tree in the center of the clearing bowed slightly, as if in mourning. And in the bark was carved a name. Ilsbeth. A week later, Claire returned alone to the hollow. She laid the doll's cracked shell beneath the weeping tree and whispered thanks. And the wind, for the first time, whispered back. Mother to mother. Emily had changed. She laughed less now. Spoke softer. Sometimes, when she looked out the window, her eyes didn't seem to focus on anything human. Claire and Daniel told themselves it was just trauma. That she needed time. Love. Stability. But some nights, Claire would hear her daughter whispering in her room. Not to a toy. Not to herself. To the trees outside. One autumn evening, a storm rolled through Elk Ridge. Lightning split the sky. The power flickered. And from deep in the forest, a low rumble rolled across the hills. Emily stood at the back window, staring out at the darkness. Claire entered quietly. Come away from there, sweetheart. Emily didn't turn. She remembers me. Claire's blood chilled. Who? Emily looked up, her eyes reflecting something far older than a child's soul should carry. The mother. The first one. She says I still belong to her. Claire knelt beside her. No, baby. You're home. You're safe. Emily finally looked at her mother. And smiled. It wasn't her smile. Not entirely. I remember the roots now, Mommy. They remember me too. In the distance, beneath the hollow, something stirred. And for the first time in years, the trees whispered a new word. Return.